Okay, shall we start then?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the first episode of a currently still unnamed podcast. I'll have to think of something within the next few weeks. But the overall idea is that we take a long book, long defined as at least 500 pages, and we read roughly, let's say, 100 pages a week, and then we just talk about it for maybe an hour or so. That's the rough outline of what we're going to do. Not only in this episode, not only in this series, but in the podcast in general. And the first series is about Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Today we're going to be discussing the first part. So that's the first 100 pages or so where we are going to witness a crime. One thing that's probably useful to bear in mind is that neither of us knows much about anything, and definitely not about this particular book or this author or this type of literature or whatever. So it's very much just a kind of book club between regular people who enjoy reading and, I don't know, might have something interesting to say. I don't know. That's the hope. Do you want to say anything, Antonia?
I totally agree with you that I don't know anything about literature really, although I'm a big reader, but can't really claim that I have any theoretical background knowledge on literature, nor in this case Russia at that time. But yes, I think this is going to be a lot of talking about subjective experiences and opinions, and hopefully a couple of interesting things will pop up.
Hopefully. We'll see.
We'll see.
Actually, so the first thing I think that we have to talk about, which is something I've already told you about in text message, but that you haven't seen yet, is the shape of the book that I've got. I know I've sent you a photo, right?
Yes, you did.
I don't know how it's like in many ways it looks completely normal, but it's definitely not normal. So the thing is, this is also an important point. So we're reading the version by Oliver Reedy, which is the Penguin Classics version that came out recently. So it's a new translation. And Antonia and I, we both ordered the same book, and then mine arrived, I think, a day after yours. And I was really surprised first that you didn't mention that the book is weirdly shaped, because mine is basically pentagonal. It has a flat base, and then usually the spine of the book is perpendicular to the base of the book, but mine is roughly 100 degrees or something, or maybe 105 degrees, and then the top, just all the edges are strongly slanted of this book. And so I first thought this was the way this book was, and I was surprised that you didn't mention anything. But then I realized because it kind of looks a bit like a tombstone also. So it kind of, in a way, fits the theme of the book. And I mean, this is obviously a misprint or a miscut, or both. I don't know what went wrong here. But it cuts off certain parts of the cover and of the translation, and somehow it just really suits the book. In some way, I think it's almost better than what I imagine the standard copy is that you have. But yeah, I think I'll definitely need to. I'll provide some sort of photo in the description of the podcast.
Yeah, you need to.
But the cool thing is I can actually read the book properly. So even though the text is completely skewed on the page, I mean, it's probably like a 30-degree angle relative to the base of the of the book. Some of this text actually fits in almost perfectly. I just lose one or two letters in the bottom line of each page. But yeah, I think we'll definitely have to tweet at Penguin and ask what exactly is going on.
I'm surprised that nobody noticed, like not a single person at some point, but it's probably all automized. I don't know where you ordered it from, but it's most likely not humans packing the books anymore.
Yeah, or if maybe they, it took me about 30 seconds to figure out that this was not intentional. So, if you're just packing this thing in an Amazon warehouse, you're not going to, look at the book and go, oh, this is really interesting. Whatever, right? You're just going to pack it. But what's interesting to me, though, is that somehow this book was completely miscut and then, I guess, still printed. So it seems, I don't know, did they first cut the pages and then printed? I don't know. But yeah,
good question.
It's not the most fascinating aspect of the book, but I have to say that whenever I show this to anyone, and I showed this to the 3 people that I talked to in lockdown, they were all absolutely amazed and fascinated by this book. And I had to look at it for like a minute or two, just because it's such a... Yeah, I mean, I think this also says a lot about the publishing industry, that this, I don't know how many 100 of books I've read, and this is the first one that isn't perfectly rectangular. So I think it says a lot about the quality of the publishing industry that this is such a big deal that the book isn't perfectly made.
Yeah, but then again, it's like, I don't know enough about how books are being printed, but it's not like the most technically advanced
You'd
thing
think so.
we would do. But
somehow it can go wrong. And
it can go wrong.
I'd really be interested to also find out, like, I always feel like I want to look into the publishing industry, like the printing industry now, to find out how a book can come out pentagonal. Like how is this possible? Anyway, but that was the very first surprise when I received this book. But I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe, Antonia, maybe you have the misprint. Maybe you have the weird rectangular version.
That's true. It's perfectly with perfect right angles. And I
can you show it to me? I actually don't know. I only don't know all of the picture. I'm probably losing like 20% of the image. Yeah, okay. I mean, to be fair, like you don't really need the bottom right part. It's what you imagine would be there. And on the back side, because there's another drawing on the back. Yeah, I guess I'm just losing, although I'm not actually losing as much as it's...
Bit disappointed.
I think what I'm losing is just like the uninteresting parts of the image anyway. Like, the bottom you had like the floor and the lower part of the skirt or whatever, or dress, right? It's not the most interesting part of the image. But yeah, anyway, shall we talk about the actual book rather?
Yeah, let's talk about
rather than the physical book. Okay.
Are we assuming listeners have read?
Yes.
Or should...
That's a good point. Yes.
Should we give a short summary?
I'm assuming that I think it would still probably be decent to give a short summary. But the assumption is that people have read this and then, for whatever reason, I think it might be good to listen to us talk about it afterwards. But no, this is not. There's going to be lots of spoilers. We're going to talk about what the crime is. So half the title is going to be revealed in this episode. Yeah, I mean, shall we give a brief summary or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Damn it, now I have to do it. Okay, so we meet good old Raskolnikov. What's his first name? I've forgotten already.
Raskolnikov Rodion, also known as Rodya Romanovich.
Yeah, actually, one thing that's I didn't read the introduction of the book. There's like a 50-page introduction by the translator, which seems excessive, so I didn't read it. Did you?
Parts of it. I started, but then I wanted to start with the actual text, actual book. So, but it is interesting. I don't know whether you're referring to this, but a note on names that
that's what
Russians typically have 3 names: a first name, a patronymic, and a surname.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's kind of useful that, I mean, in a way, it's silly to put it in there because once you know this, it's true for every Russian book. But this was very confusing for me when I tried to read War and Peace when I was like 17 or something. And I thought like, man, this is so confusing. Everyone has like 3 names plus another name. And I didn't know that the middle name is just the name of the dad and then an itch at the end, basically, right?
Yeah.
For males, at least. So I was like, there's this, I don't know, Alexei, and then there's Alexevich, and they have all these similar names, and it's super confusing.
It is confusing.
It is good that he mentioned this at the beginning.
Yeah.
And this is also, as with most Russian books, I'm glad that there is an explanation. Not an explanation, but like with a play, you have a list of characters here in the beginning. So it is nice to know that the main character, Raskolnikov, can be referred to as Raskolnikov, Rodion, Rodya Romanovich, Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov. Like, there's lots of ways in which you can address this guy. And also father, which was there's the note in the main thing that when there's the victim of the crime later on, it turns out, who's basically a stranger to this guy, apart from maybe like a business setting, refers to him as father because apparently you can do that in Russia to men. I don't know. But yeah. Actually, I was trying to summarize the book, right? Or
Yeah.
the first part. So
Raskolnikov.
that guy with the multiple names, he's not exactly a chill dude, let's put it that way. For he used to be a student in law, I believe. And so I don't think it's actually entirely clear why he's not a student anymore. Well, they said because he couldn't afford it, right?
Yeah, I think he can't afford it in the beginning. So he used to teach, but that was too little to allow him to continue his studies, which is why he had to pause them pretty much. So he now refers to himself as a former student. I think this is something so. And then he receives a letter. So he's very poor, and I think from what you can sense is that he's not entirely used to being in this situation of poverty, and also doesn't do him well psychologically or emotionally, as far as I understand. And then he receives a letter from his mother, who tells him about his sister getting married or being engaged to what's his name?
Oh, don't ask me. Yes, a stranger, basically, right? Like that's the. I'm sure he'll become more important later on, but I haven't remembered. I know Lucien is his name, right?
Lucien Piotr Petrovich, and he's a man of business.
Whatever the fuck that means.
Businessman. But Raskolnikov doesn't approve of this engagement at all. But he feels like it's partly his fault and that he can't really do anything about it, because I think one reason for the engagement is that Lucien, so this man of business, has money, so he will obviously stay in his sister and I think also help the mother. So Raskolnikov feels guilty because he, rather than being able to send money to his sister and his mother, he's actually receiving money from them, which is why he believes he needs to do something about this and kind of like rescue his sister from this engagement, so to say. And so then he decides to murder Alyona Ivanov, who's a pawnbroker, who he has pretty much given all his valuables to. And the idea is to steal, to murder her and to steal. Not entirely sure whether he only wants to steal back his stuff initially or whether he's intending to take more. Anyway, he gets an axe, and at a time where he knows that Alyona is going to be alone at home, he goes there and murders her. He's then surprised by Alyona's sister, who he murders as well because she's there at the wrong place. And then he runs back home,
well,
and that's pretty much. Pardon? Was
you might as well.
Yeah. No, obviously because she would have been a witness. And he managed to escape and made it back home. And that's pretty much the end of part one.
And that's the end of our discussion. So thank you for listening.
Yeah.
No, but what I find interesting, so I think that's kind of interesting. There's one thing you said there that I think is not actually correct. And that is you said, I don't know whether you said it intentionally, but you said that he received this letter and then he decides to kill this woman. But he actually, the beginning of the first chapter, or in the very first chapter, when he visits her, right? He already visits her to check out all the stuff. So he actually already has this plan before he receives the letter from his mother. And
that's true, but sorry?
I mean, what I find interesting is that what I want to say is that in a way, this seems like, in part, this is written as if this guy has no volition or no ability to choose over his actions in a way. And there's sometimes it's written like he says like he's almost like automatically doing this stuff, blah, blah, blah. Also what I mean is that before he actually receives the letter, he visits this woman, right? he says he needs to pawn something, but he basically just wants to check out the location, see where everything is so he can steal it then afterwards. And then he goes to a bar where he listens to this old guy basically drunkenly tell him his story about how he fucked up his life and how he fucked up the life of his family, especially his daughter, who's now a prostitute. And then he visits that guy's family and sees kind of the misery that this old, can't remember what his former job was, but that this old guy put his family into, particularly, his wife and his daughter. And then after that, Raskolnikov receives the letter and basically sees that what he's doing the same thing that this guy is doing to his family. And I think I'm never quite sure like how to interpret this because it's always kept kind of vague, but it's not that his sister's, prostituting herself, but she's just marrying some random dude, right? Anyway, but what I find interesting here is that it's from all these events, right? It seems almost like he was pushed into it a bit, right? Like he sees this misery that's going to happen, and as if there's only one way out of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But he has planned it kind of even before then. That's the first scene, I think, if I remember correctly. Him going there to check out how he can steal the stuff, right? And he talks about the axe already then.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe I misunderstood it, but for me it felt like this was a very vague kind of like idea, it seemed to me, and then like the trigger for actually doing it was the letter. But
so one thing that so in a way I agree with you. I think that's the way it's written, but I don't think, this might be a nuance here, but I think in a way it's written from his perspective almost to justify that he didn't mean to, or I don't know, something like that. But what I find interesting is that like one thing that really stayed with me from a just writing perspective is one of the first, I think this is on one of the first pages, when he walks to, what's her name again?
Aliona.
When he walks to her house, one of the first things he thinks of is his hat that he's wearing. Because he's wearing an unusual German-style hat or something like that. I don't know the exact details here, but he walks through the streets and then he remembers, oh no, I'm wearing this hat. People are going to recognize me. So to me, and this is already he's rehearsing this whole thing, right? He's going through it and saying, okay, I can't be wearing that hat because then people recognize me and I need to be as inconspicuous as I can. So, to me, it's, in a way, in the end, it almost feels like he did it without even wanting to. But it's also super planned, the whole thing. Like, he even had planned, like, how he can hide the axe in his jacket and all this kind of stuff. Like, he's really thought this through, in a way. Right?
Yes, but then when he eventually decides to do it, it feels like this is almost like a spontaneous. So I completely agree with him that he's like planned it through and also like knows exactly when the girl in the kitchen is not going to be there, so he can get the axe, etc.
Yeah.
But then when he decides to do it, it's almost spontaneous, and it's almost like it's not him making the decision, but it just goes into some sort of trance-like state and simply follows. I don't know. Follows his. It almost appears as if he was following some orders of something, but it's not he who consciously decides to do this.
Yeah.
Am I making sense at all?
Yeah, I know what you mean, and this is like one thing that I find interesting about it is that there is clearly that part to it, but there is, also this clearly planned thing. So, one thing I'll probably say is this was planned ahead, but very poorly. So he thinks about all these things that can happen, how he has to go through the back entrance of the thing, and as I said, he finds out by chance when this woman will be on her own, when her sister won't be there, so he can kill her. And like everything in a way is planned there, but it's just planned very poorly. And this is also when I said earlier that I'm not entirely sure why he's not a student anymore. I wonder whether it was really just the finances. At least right now, he seems completely incapable of thinking straight. I mean, the whole thing is also like, you have the situation where you're poor, you don't know how to deal with it, and it seems like because of this, your family is basically sacrificing their own happiness for you to be able to be the student. And somehow, the only solution that he can think of is to murder an old lady to steal her things. Like, he's thought about the murder almost before he thought about the theft, it seems. Like, he could have somehow maybe tried to steal something else from someone else, right? Like, it's just so... Like, none of it really makes any sense. And this is not a criticism to the author, right? It's just the state of mind of Raskolnikov is just all over the place. Like, he's not thinking anything through properly.
Yeah, but then again, she was kind of like an obvious victim because of two reasons. First of all, seems to be one of the very few people he knows who has a lot of money and valuables. And then secondly, there's this thing about her that, so when he overhears the conversation in the bar of the two men talking about her, they say something very interesting, and they talk about how much she's actually brought or destroyed other people's lives and accumulated wealth through her profession. And they kind of like, one of them suggests that she would better be killed or something along those lines, but doesn't really mean it. But they still talk about whether killing her would be, because it would help so many people in a way, or it could help many people, whether the crime of killing her wouldn't actually be smaller than letting her continue destroying other people's lives. And I think actually there's one sentence which I marked, which says, "Won't thousands of good deeds iron out one tiny little crime?" I mean, this is like I think like an interesting question, but because of that, because she's bringing so many, destroying so many lives, she is in a way an obvious victim. No.
Yep, I know, and it's. I mean, yeah. So here's the thing: he hears that, and that's. I mean, it's not not a good legal argument, but it's a moral case you can make, and I understand that. But the thing is, he doesn't think it through. He just hears that and goes like, "Oh yeah." It's almost. It seems to me almost like, like he was just looking for. Yeah, it might as well be her then. But I don't know. It just seemed weird to me that a guy who supposedly wants to be, and being a student in like 1850 is a different thing than being a student now, right? Like that the only thing he can think of also seems to be like, okay, teaching didn't work out. Okay, I'm going to steal stuff then. And if I'm going to do that, it might as well be this terrible person.
But don't you think also it's partly because he wants to have his stuff back? So it feels like, or at least because he feels like it rightfully belongs to him, but he will probably never ever see it again. So
yes, but I feel like if that had been the case, he would have thought more about the things that he wanted back. The only time that we really hear about what he gave her is they mentioned briefly, I think the first time he went. Yeah, after the first time he went there, that's when he overheard this conversation between the two people. And there again, he gave away like this ring that his sister gave him because she wanted him to think of her. So that's the first thing he gave away. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think he cared too much about the stuff. I mean, yeah. Yeah,
maybe.
But what I find interesting is this difference between it kind of all makes sense, his argument, like the way it's put out, but it doesn't seem to me like he ever thinks anything through properly. It seems, I mean, he's not in a state to think things through, right? In one, I can't remember where this is. At one part, he's so hungry and drinks a bit of vodka and then passes out and has this terrible dream about the horse. I didn't like reading that part. That was, I meant to look it up. Isn't that also what happened to Nietzsche? So briefly in this dream, that's a really horrible dream that he has when he's just passed out, I think in the middle of the day. Just like he's not in a good physiological or psychological state. He has this dream of him being a kid with his father, and then what's exactly the scene? They watch this group of young men. Well, it seems like they're all kind of drunk and a bit rambunctious, and one of the guys he has a horse and a cart, and it's an old horse, and he starts whipping his horse, and he says, like, everyone go in the cart, we're driving, and people say, like, no, you have an old, weak horse, like, it can't carry all of us. It's weird. I mean, in a way, I think he just wants to beat the shit out of his horse, and he's just looking for excuse to do so, and then he starts just whipping his horse relentlessly, and the other people start whipping the horse also, and then at the end, like 6 people are just whipping this horse across the eyes and the nose and everything. And in the end, the guy takes like I think he starts with like a big piece of wood, and then he ends up with a crowbar and just bashes onto the horse until it dies. And the interesting thing is here, apart from the fact that this was quite horrible to read, is I think, if I remember correctly, this was kind of what happened to Nietzsche when he had a mental breakdown, that there were people whipping a horse in a public place, and then he couldn't take it, and then ran to the horse and like held it in his arms the way Raskolnikov did as a kid also after the horse was dead, and said, like, you can't do this to the horse.
Really?
But yeah, anyway, what I was trying to get at there was more that he just passed out in the middle of the day, right? Or maybe it was in the evening, I can't remember. But he's just...
It was in the middle of the day, but then again, he had a glass of vodka on an empty stomach, so I don't know.
I also don't know what a glass of vodka means in Russia.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. I don't know what exactly we're talking about here.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
But the thing is, like, this is just his general state. In a way, I'm defending his poor, or him not thinking stuff through.
Yeah, he's in complete despair.
Yeah.
And I think he doesn't, and that's what I meant at the beginning, he doesn't seem to be able to deal with this situation because it doesn't seem to be a situation he's been in before, at least not to that extent. It's an assumption, but he's not a smart, poor person who's learned to live on the streets and find a way. But he's emotionally, physically, on all levels in complete despair, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. Yeah, he's not in a happy place at any point in the first part. Actually, one thing that I wanted to talk about very briefly is the translation, and it relates to this. Is that so? I actually read the first part in German a few years ago. I don't know by whom, but the DTV has an edition, and I read that one. And I think this translation here that we have now about really suits the state of mind that Raskolnikov has a lot better than at least the German one. Because I think the English one kind of maintains this kind of frenzied state of mind that he has, whereas the German is a more, like a 19th century author who's like a more traditional classical way of telling this thing. Everything's a bit calmer, sentences are a bit longer and all this kind of stuff. Whereas I feel like this one, this is something, I'm often quite critical of translations, but this one doesn't really feel like it's much of a translation. Of course, you are like translating from a foreign culture, but it feels like very natural. And I think one thing that he gets across really well is this kind of complete despair that Raskolnikov finds himself in.
What I also find is this constant state, that something bad is coming. And sometimes it's explicit in a way that he's like, kind of like asking himself, am I really going to do this? Can I really do something like this? But sometimes it's also less explicit, but there's this constant feel when you read the first 100 pages that even without knowing the title, Crime and Punishment, but something is coming, and and I think this is partly because of the language. It feels like it's such a turmoil within him and pretty much, around him, that this is like at some point it's just gonna X or implode in some way. Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I think it's also because, as you said, like, I think this is in the first chapter where he does this kind of rehearsal. and visits the woman and everything. Like he's already thinking about all these things. Like, am I really going to do this? Or even then, just thinking of like, oh, I did that wrong. If I do this, then people will recognize me, and just then already being very defensive about everything. And
yeah, although at that point you don't really know exactly what he's going to do. You know that he's up to something, maybe.
He's definitely. Well, I think at the beginning it seems like he's just trying to steal something. I think it's fairly obvious, like when he goes to this pawnbroker and he looks at like, okay, here's where all the money is, and here's that, and here's where she keeps the keys. I think it's fairly clear that he's trying to steal something there. But that's what I found so interesting. That then so the thing is, he's trying to steal from an elderly lady, right? And I can't remember any. There's probably some in there, but I can't remember what he's described as physically. But you would, on average, imagine that a young, at least somewhat healthy guy could overwhelm an old lady. And he, it's not that he, how should we say? To me, the violence somehow is part of the whole thing for him. Because, like, if I think about I'm going to steal something from this old lady, I'm not going to bring a fucking axe. Like, you don't need an axe. He knows the person, he gets in. Like, he doesn't need an axe to break in. Like, worst case, he could have brought, like, a pipe or something. Like, you don't need a fucking axe to overwhelm an old lady.
Yeah. Although, because he is at some point, he says that he's already, he also has got some, what do you call it? Like clippers or scissors, a knife or something, like a small...
Oh, like a pocket knife, yeah.
Yeah, something like this, yeah. A small tool or weapon. But then he decides against it. And I think that maybe has two reasons. One of them, he really wants to ensure that he's going to be successful. And then also, isn't it a bit more... maybe keep a bit more distance? I imagine if you... kind of like, for example, really with a small pocket knife, there's probably going to be a bit more fighting and a bit more like having to hold somebody down, and like unless you really manage with the first punch to knock them out. But an axe is like, yes, there's a bit more distance between the murderer and the
murdery.
Murdery, and then also it's like you can more easily knock somebody out immediately, and you don't really have to come physically close. And I can imagine, especially because he's on some level knowing that what he's doing is completely wrong, maybe he wouldn't have had the strength to carry it through if it would have been a bit more difficult.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And should obviously also clarify that he doesn't hit her with the blade of the axe, right? He uses it as a blunt weapon. And you're right. I think he hits her on the crown of the head, so she was facing away from him, right? I think she was turned away, and then he hits on the head 3 times or something. Which, man, hitting someone on the head 3 times is, that's gonna be mushy by at latest the 3rd time you hit on it. But again, like, okay, I get, like, what you said earlier, that he, in a way, killing her isn't, there's this, like, moral question, like, if one person does lots of harm to lots of people, is it justified to, I guess, take that person out so that person can't harm all the other people? What was I saying? So I understand that aspect of it, but he could have, like, I don't know, there are other ways to go about this just to bash someone on the skull.
And I wonder, this is we're gonna see in the next parts, but I wonder how he's not really like making up for. So what is he gonna do? Because it's obviously the idea is that so many people suffer because of her, but is he then gonna, from what he's stolen, is he going to give some money to other people? And if not, if he's just keeping it for himself, then then that moral question is out of the window, because then he doesn't really make up for the suffering that she's caused.
Also,
and then
just to add to that point, he actually isn't helping the people who pawn something from him, I don't think. So I don't know exactly what the legal status is of these kind of things. But the thing is that what they write about is that the one reason why this woman is such a bad person is because she's living with her sister, and she's, keeping her almost as a slave, what they say.
But then he's killing the sister.
Yeah,
So
no,
he
that's not
killed
my point. Yeah. No. I mean, that was, in a way, that's a different thing we can talk about later. But my point is more that one thing that these two men that Raskolnikov overhears talking, one thing that they say is so bad about her is that she's not giving any of her will to her sister, but she's giving it all away to some monastery or something. Right?
Yeah.
She has a will where everything of hers goes away. So now I'm assuming if you're a pawnbroker, doesn't all your stuff then go to the monastery? It doesn't go to the people, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm not sure how much he's taken, but I assume that because he didn't take the box, did he?
That's actually one thing that was slightly unclear to me. I don't know whether he actually took anything.
He took.
Oh, he took her wallet, her purse.
Yeah, he took the wallet.
He took her purse, but that's pretty much it, right? Because I think he couldn't open the rest.
Do you open the box under the bed? No.
Yeah, but I think then the sister came in, right?
Yeah, but I'm not sure whether he took something from the box, because I think there was something in there, something valuable, not only the dress, but it was like a watch or something.
But if I remember correctly, I mean, like when he comes home, there's no mentioning of the box or anything, right? So I'm assuming he didn't take it.
So probably also because he was kind of like fleeing, and like he would have mentioned if he had been carrying a large object, but maybe
that's what I mean. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but then the next thing is also that the situation is not black and white, and that she's a bad person and therefore deserves to be killed. But in many ways, like the people who come to her, she's like, although she ends up charging too much, but people do come to her initially because she gives them some money. So in some weird way, she's also there, rescue as well as downfall, because she's giving us money, but then they obviously she has like ridiculous charges, etc. So
although we should also add, by today's standards, she has like interest rates of like 9% or something, right? We're not talking about like the people now who I think it's like illegal now in most countries, but I remember seeing some ads in the UK a few years ago with like 900% interest or something, So she's not at that level, but yeah, she's charging more than at least it seems most people are.
Yeah. But by killing her, you're not really he's not changing the system, and the people who came to her because of it to request some money still have the same problems. So yeah, so in terms of the moral question, I don't really think that this holds here, because it's no benefit to anybody other than maybe the monastery. Yeah, which
this is all the monastery's plot. They planted all those people around him. Yeah. I agree. I mean, he's primarily solving his own problem, and maybe also solving other people's problem, but then again, only on a very short-term basis. I mean, the people who don't have money and lend money at high interest rates, and that's a problem, because that's usually just a cycle that reinforces itself. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she's just a small cog in that whole system. I don't think she's doing anything particularly unusual. She's also, what I find also interesting is that she somehow seems to have this power without really seeming to have any. So one thing they criticize, that like as soon as you're late with your payments to her, your object will just disappear or something, right? Mm. So in a way, she like holds this strong power over people, but she's not like the kind of person who has like a gang of people who will like find your home and beat you up, right? Mm. She's like her evil is like when you look at like these kind of books, right? The bad things she does is pretty limited compared to what a lot of at least other literary characters would do in this kind of situation. So I mean, all that happens is if you're late with your payment, she's just very strict with her financial stuff, but somehow she doesn't really have any power, right? Like she's just a random person basically. If you don't go to her and give her your stuff, nothing's going to happen. Yeah,
I wonder, because it's almost like it seems like why didn't this happen before? Especially because she
exactly.
destroyed so many people's lives. Why didn't anybody before try to steal stuff from her or kill her? But then there's something, because she usually doesn't leave the house. So it seems to me, I think it's mentioned towards the end of the first part. So that for me, I took this a bit like as indirect sign that she was maybe a bit aware of her situation, that it might be dangerous, and that some people might be very, disgruntled towards her. And that something like this might happen. And also when he first knocks, she doesn't really want to open. So I think maybe on some level, though, she had this immense authority over people, surprisingly, but then she probably also knew that this was on somewhat shaky grounds.
Exactly. And she didn't even recognize him, right? I think because she doesn't see particularly well or something. I mean, if you wanted to tell the story from her perspective, you could probably tell it as a story of an old lady who's just trying to get by and is in constant fear of someone robbing her or something, and then a guy comes along and hits her on the head with an axe.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, there would be a shorter book then.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know, maybe she has some internal moral dilemmas she's going through.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, this person's really suffering, but I'm also suffering. I need the money.
Yeah.
Well, everyone says she has a lot of money. Again, this is not her saying it, but this is just an outside voice. And again, this is kind of what I find where Raskolnikov doesn't think things through properly. He just hears one account of rumors is the next thing, right? He never talked to the sister and asked her like what it's like or anything, right? He just overhears a young guy telling a story in a pub to another guy, right? And guys tell a lot of stories in pubs, and that's all he basically has to go on, right? And his own experiences of overcharging or whatever, but that's it.
But do you think that it's almost it just gives him some more assurance? I think this whole pub situation, and when him overhearing people, two men discussing whether she should be killed and whether this immoral deed would cover all the immoral deeds that she's done. I think it's an interesting question, but as we agree on, it doesn't really make sense in this case. But it almost feels like he doesn't want to think about this in more detail, but he just wants to have more assurance and reasons for why his actions, to support his actions.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He's it gives him like an easy way out to go like, oh yeah, what I'm doing is justified, rather than, especially, I mean, I don't know what exactly a legal student did in 1850, whatever. But you'd imagine that they'd have a bit more training in actually figuring out what's true and not just going like, oh, well, someone said it, therefore it has to be true. And therefore I'm morally somewhat justified in my actions. I think he's just looking for
justification.
An easy way out and a justification for it,
Although it's the easy way out, I just wonder what it would have been the other way out, so that his sister gets married to this businessman, and then he might receive some money from him, or the businessman might be able to help him find a job, etc. But
I don't know.
It's like in his current situation, it seems like there's, at least that's the impression the reader gets, I think, that it very much seems like from his side there's nothing he can do, no action he can take to get himself out of the situation other than doing something illegal.
Well, he could have lied to his family, right? I don't know, maybe lying to your family is worse than killing an old lady. But he could have, the whole thing that gets him in this mess is that basically he's living off his mother's small pension, right? That's the whole problem. I don't know what happens to his father. I can't remember. I guess he died. Anyway, his mother has a small pension from which she feeds herself, her daughter, and Raskolnikov. And she also like knits scarves or something, from which she makes like a fair amount relative to her pension in addition. And Raskolnikov is living off that, right? So like one step, and the sister, and like, well, this money isn't enough for the three of them. And his sister then marries this guy because that's the only way they see that they can support, not the only way, but at least the easiest way for them also that they can support Raskolnikov being a student again. I don't know. He maybe.
Well, they don't know. They don't know that he is not a student anymore.
I think so, right?
I think in a letter the mom assumes.
It's to support his students. Anyway, it's to support his studies, right? That's the whole point. Okay, maybe they think he's a student, but the reason that his sister marries this guy is because this is a financial way out of their misery. Let's put it that way, maybe. He could have just said like, oh yeah, I got a job. And then it's like, maybe then his sister said like, oh yeah, I guess then I don't need to. Then we're financially more settled. I don't know. Like his sister and his mother haven't seen him in years. He could tell them anything.
Yeah, but I wonder what... Yeah, what I wasn't so clear about is why the marriage would have been such a disaster. It's, I mean, I get that maybe it doesn't seem like this is a love marriage and therefore he can't know that the businessman will treat his sister well. However, it seems like such a strong response. He doesn't want his sister to get married to this guy such an extent that I almost wonder whether there's something like another level of, or is it, what is it, why can't he? Because it seems like he does want to be more involved in his sister's and his mother's life, make some decision or I don't know, change something about their situation. So, but just telling them, listen, I've got a job now, you don't need to send me any money. It's almost as if he would be removing himself, but it seems like his reaction was so strong. So I wonder whether he wants to be, you know, the man of the family and wants to ensure that his sister doesn't get married off. And to be the man of the family, he needs to have some kind of money.
Yeah. I mean, so two things, I guess I could comment on that. The first thing is that part of it is just emotionally driven by the fact that just before he received the letter, he saw this family in complete misery where the daughter prostituted herself and that kind of stuff, right? So it's just this analogy going like, oh, look, that guy is living off the cost of his family. And now, like, they're all miserable, like completely miserable. The neighborhood made, like, the door was open or something, right? And the neighbors looked in and, like, almost, like, laughed at them and everything. It was just internal misery and social stigma attached with it and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, I think in part, this is just, he saw an analogous situation just before and thought, like, oh, I can't let this happen, right? Which is not, you know, necessarily the thought through thing, but I can understand how, like, that can have a strong effect on you, right? Yeah, the second thing is, I can't remember whether I had a second thing, but the second thing is more about the question you asked there, why he has such a problem with it. And yeah, I'm not entirely sure either, because it seems like it seems like the guy, the Lucien guy, just doesn't care about his sister in a way. Like, he doesn't seem like he'd care enough to be abusive, right? Like, he just seems like a guy who wants an arranged marriage, more or less, where he can have a wife and they can have a family, and then they like, it's a very business-like thing, right? It seems like his sister wouldn't really see much of the guy anyway. Like, I don't know. And it doesn't, I'm not getting the impression that Raskolnikov is a huge romantic in the sense that he thinks every marriage should be out of love and all that. Like, there's never any mention of love from his side, right? Nothing at all. Somehow. So I don't know whether that would be a motivation for him.
Yeah. So I wonder what it is. Is something to do with pride and being like, because if another man has to jump in to...
I see. You mean like before he could have been the student himself and could have been the genius, but now, especially because they also want like Raskolnikov to work for Lucien, right?
Yeah.
So now he's just like helping out almost and got there through connections.
And also, I mean, you know, like obviously as a man in particular, especially during this time, I imagine being head of a family, and being the strong male and being the one who kind of like looks after your mother and your sister once your dad has passed probably was more important than it might be now. And then if somebody else kind of like jumps in and then he would be employed to him, maybe that's like one reason for why this whole situation, the idea of his sister getting married, is so difficult for him.
Yeah, that could be. I'm trying to think whether we like know anything about him, like in terms of whether he, like what you say makes complete sense. I'm just trying to see whether I can remember anything that relates to it, because I can't remember like him going like, I have to be the man of the hat, right? Like I could, but yeah, it makes sense what you say. But yeah,
or maybe there's something we don't know yet. Who knows?
Yeah, of course we've read the first sixth, so yeah, I don't know. Like in a way, that's the funny thing, right? We've read 100 pages that are not all, but a large part is about Raskolnikov and what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't really know that much about him, right?
No.
There's fairly little biographical information other than, the stuff we mentioned. He's a former student of law. He's poor. He's not dealing well with it.
But that's probably also the nature of very moments of despair, that one is very obsessed about the problem at hand, and there's a lot of...
What reduces to that then?
Yeah, and there's a lot of circular thinking, or forth and back thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, another thing like that he could have done, right? I mean, yeah, one thing that's interesting you say that, because it is like one thing I thought earlier is that the entire 100 pages, right? I mean, there's of course like explaining the family stuff, and that takes a bit, but like in 100 pages, all he really thinks about is this crime he's going to commit. And yeah, that's what I mean. He seems to lack kind of the freedom to just take a step back and say, like, okay, what are my options? Like, what are, like, even hypothetically, what could I do to get out of this myself? I mean, for example, there's also this friend he mentions who got him the teaching job or something. This is only super short, because he basically says, oh, I could visit this friend. I mean, his friend also, like, this guy doesn't have friends, right? He doesn't seem like, even before this misery, he didn't seem like the most fun person. It seems like he basically didn't have any friends, right? But there was this one guy he got along with, and that guy got him a teaching job or something like that, or helped him get one. And then he thinks, oh, I could ask him whether I can, get a teaching job again. But then he says that, well, I'll do that after the crime. It's like, I mean, really? You want to murder someone before you see where, I mean, of course the teaching wasn't enough. I get it. But
Yeah.
But yeah, you are right. Like his entire worldview that we experience in the first 100 pages is restricted to the crime and motivations for it, kind of, right? It's very, his thinking is very restricted.
Yeah. Well, interested to see what's going to happen next. So the next discussion, we will have read up to...
Well, just part 2, right?
Yeah. Where does part 2 end? Yeah.
It's like it's the longest part. Part 2 is slightly longer than the others, but...
Okay. So up to 232.
I mean, it's easy to just say just until the end of part 2, right? Because in case people are using other versions.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people like listening to this, maybe they'll listen to the other one too. We'll see what the retention rate is between episode 1 and episode 2. It would be great to see just exponential decay within the episode, like everyone just stopped listening after 2 minutes, and exponential decay
it is possible.
within the episode between episodes.
Yeah,
but that's fine. We're not doing it for them. We're doing it because otherwise I'd just not finish reading these long books, but get distracted along the way.
Yeah, same here.
Okay.
Cool.
Hello, this is the second episode of a still unnamed podcast in which we are talking about Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. This is the second episode in which we're going to discuss part 2. In the first episode, we discussed part 1. If you didn't listen to the first part, then maybe do that first. Or at the very least, read the first part. And we're also assuming that you've read the second part. And so yeah, as there's going to be lots of spoilers. So I think, like last time, it's probably good to have a very brief summary of what happened in part 2. It's 110 pages with a lot of plot points, so I think I'm just going to briefly summarize what happens. I think what I'm going to do is a 2 or 3 sentence summary for each chapter. I'm just going to go through it chapter by chapter. Right? So, at the end of part 1, Raskolnikov had murdered those women, returned home. So that's where we now start in the first chapter of part 2. So he's at home, he stayed in bed all night and slept half of the next day. He wakes up and then tries to hide the evidence of what he had. So he did take some items from the house. He tries to hide that in some hole in the wall or whatever behind the wallpaper. He tries to, just remove all the evidence. That he has some blood stains on the bottom of his trousers. Tries to get rid of all that. And then, kind of whilst he's doing that, he gets a letter and is summoned to the police station. So, like a good boy, he goes to the police station and obviously assumes that this is about the murder, but it has nothing to do with that. The police just wants him here because his landlady got really fed up that he hadn't paid his rent basically for months. The police talks about the murder, and I think they have some suspects or something like that. They're starting to work on it. But, no one's assuming that Raskolnikov is the murderer. And then when they talk about it, he loses his shit and faints on the spot. And then they carry him home. Chapter 2, then, Raskolnikov goes home and tries to hide basically the evidence of anything, of all the stuff that he stole. So he takes everything and wanders around St. Petersburg, finds a big rock somewhere in some back alley, and basically hides it all underneath this random rock. The rock happens to be close to his friend Razumikin, the one that he wanted to, but then didn't visit in part 1. Then he is exceedingly erratic when he visits his friend. His friend offers again to help him out with some money or something, but Raskolnikov just basically freaks out and leaves again. He then goes home, falls asleep, and basically hallucinates or has a nightmare about the policeman beating his landlady. But then it turns out that, he just hallucinated that. None of that happened. In chapter 3, then, he continues, or basically he falls into like feverish dreams or sleep for 3 to 4 days or something like that. And he's visited by his friend Razumikin, the police, the maid, and all sorts of people who happen to be in this like very small room. But it turns out that during his kind of feverish ramblings, he said a few things that related to the murder. He didn't make it obvious that he had anything to do with it, but he said quite a few words that had something to do with it. Nonetheless, none of the people really suspected here that he had anything to do with the murder. In chapter 4, then, the doctor arrives on the scene. So it's now the doctor, Razumikin, Raskolnikov, the maid, and maybe someone else in the room. Basically, the doctor and Razumikin talk about the murder because it's, big local news that 2 people were murdered in this house just across the corner. They report how the police are, interviewing suspects and getting the investigation going. Again, no one's here suspecting Raskolnikov at all. But interestingly, they actually get the story of what happened pretty accurately. So Razumikin pretty much summarizes what happens, and it's almost exactly what happened. So they already have managed to pretty much recreate what happened, and they mention that maybe someone even saw the murderer, because there's always lots of people around there. In chapter 5, then, we get a visit from a new man, a strange man who just arrives and who no one knows. And it's Lucien, the what's the word?
Fiancé.
Thank you. The fiancé of Raskolnikov's sister. He seems to be, I don't actually know whether he's particularly good looking per se, but he seems to have really tried to make an effort to impress Raskolnikov. He really dressed in his best clothes and was very, very well groomed and all this kind of stuff. In any case, Raskolnikov is, as in the entire book, just completely unbearable. And basically, he doesn't, in the beginning, he's just very rude to him and ignores him and pretends to be in his feverish hallucinations. But then as they keep talking, as everyone keeps talking about the murder that happened and all this kind of stuff, I can't remember exactly what happens, but at the end, he kind of throws Lucien out, and people are considering whether he maybe even ruined the entire engagement to his sister or whatever is going on there. Then in the 6th chapter, Raskolnikov decides that he can't continue living like this with this kind of guilt. And he says he wants to end it all. And basically there are 2 ways that he can do that. First would be through suicide. The second would be by handing himself into the police. And he kind of considers both in this chapter. He witnesses a suicide or an attempted suicide where a woman jumps off a bridge into the river and is then rescued by the police or some man, I can't remember. And I think when he sees that, he decides against that. And also throughout this chapter, he really basically, he considers confessing, but he never quite has the guts to do it. So he just behaves incredibly weirdly to the policeman who he happens to meet in a bar. And then he also visits the flat in which he murdered the woman and, just walks about. The flat's being renovated by people, and he again behaves incredibly. He basically provokes almost people to get him to the police, but doesn't say why. At this point, people are still just very confused by him and his behavior, but no one actually so far really suspects too much. But then in chapter 7, it seems like we get quite a plot twist. In the first part, Raskolnikov met this drunken man who basically told him that he, drank away his fortune and his standing in society and made his entire family miserable. That man now happens to get run over or something like that or basically he falls drunkenly into the street and then a few horses run him over. Raskolnikov happens to be there. He recognizes the man, brings him home to his family, and the man dies. And also, I can't remember, maybe this also already happened in chapter 6, I can't remember, but Razumikin kind of alludes that the policeman is starting to have some weird thoughts about Raskolnikov. He doesn't explicitly say that the policeman is considering whether Raskolnikov might have something to do with the murder, but he at least strongly alludes to it. Yeah, and then the 7th chapter ends with, it seems, Raskolnikov's entire mood changed. Somehow he felt kind of uplifted or had new life spirit or felt a purpose to living or something when he saw one of the daughters of this drunken man. And I think he gave her all his money, all that kind of stuff. And this whole act at least kind of shook him out of this frenzy that he's been having for basically part 1 and 2. And that's kind of where we are. And that was more than 2 sentences per chapter. God, that took ages to say. That was like 10 minutes almost. Maybe I should write this out next time, because I didn't plan to say this much.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea to be very concise and just stick to. I mean, it's interesting, but it's probably in terms for the purpose of the podcast a bit too long of a summary. So yeah, first impression of second part. My impression was like he was like, for the most part, just completely out of his mind, and it's almost like kind of like a Kafkaesque situation. So that as a reader, I sometimes wasn't sure whether people were actually here, whether he was hallucinating, because it starts with him thinking then the landlady is beaten outside of his door. However, he doesn't think about going outside, looking or helping her. And then turns out that this had never happened. And all of a sudden there are lots of random people coming and going. And it's just, in combination with his state of mind, one wonders, is this actually happening? And what are they doing here? It just seems so surreal in a way that they're just like not leaving him alone. It almost, for me, it felt a bit like they were his kind of like obsessive thoughts or voices that wouldn't leave him alone, when in fact seems like they were actually there, his friend and the doctor and then the maid. But it's not really, I mean, at least for me, it wasn't really clear why all of a sudden all these people were there and had such a big interest in him.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I mean, when, I wrote down notes, like after reading each chapter, I wrote down like a few bullet points just so I remember the plot points to summarize it. And I also wrote like a few other things just down whilst I was at it. And one thing I wrote down after chapter 2 is like, okay, what's real, what's fiction, or what's real, what's not real, as like a theme. But then somehow it's interesting that you say that, but I never actually, after that, thought about it for the rest of the part. I mean, it is true. Like, it seems like in part 1, no one, like he was left alone almost completely the entire time, and now suddenly there's always, I mean, it's always described as this tiny room, and now there's like usually 4 people in there or something. But yeah, I think I agree with you. I think all of this actually happened. I mean, so Lucien visiting is very expected almost.
Yeah.
We didn't even mention his mum and his sister arrive right at the end. That's actually how the chapter ends, that they're in his room. And then he comes back, yeah. But that's all kind of part already established in part 1, right? That his sister and his mother come down, Lucien is arriving, so yeah. That all makes sense. And it kind of, I mean, I'm kind of surprised that the friends suddenly started caring for him so much, because they hadn't seen each other for 4 months or something. And it seemed like they weren't super close. And Raskolnikov was just so weird that I'm surprised the friend even bothered looking.
So this is where I thought there must be some agenda of this friend, whether this friend wants to take a cut of the money or...
Which money?
So first it's the money that he's being sent by his mum, which his friend uses to buy Raskolnikov new clothing.
Which is what you do as a friend. You buy clothes for each other.
Yeah. No,
That's
but he just went out and got some new clothing. And I was wondering, is he going to keep some of the money as in kind of like, a commission? But he didn't. He in turn returned all the change.
Yeah, and I don't think, well, the thing is, just briefly, initially, I don't think he knew about any of this, right? He just wanted to visit his, I mean, so here's the big question, right? What exactly did Raskolnikov say in those 3 to 4 days? Because all we know is that Raskolnikov has this first day where he goes to the police. Then he goes home, starts hallucinating. Then 3 or 4 days, we don't really know what happened. All we get is this reconstruction afterwards about them like saying like, oh, you did this thing or that thing. So I mean, the thing is, I guess the friend did initially visit Raskolnikov. I think just because I wanted to see him, because he didn't know anything about any of this, right? Raskolnikov just came to him, behaved weirdly and left. I think that was all that happened. So I think the initial visit at least was out of being a friend, but yeah, I wonder what happened in that time in between.
Yeah, that's what I've been wondering as well. So does he know, does a friend know more than he says he knows? Because it's almost like if you would know about the murder and the stealing of the money and whatever was in these boxes, then this might be the reason, because maybe he's got leverage now and he'll be like, okay, either you give me half or I'm going to tell the police. So,
but he could already have done that. So,
but maybe he doesn't know where the money is. Or...
Well, yeah, but he could have already told Raskolnikov, like, hey, where is it? You know?
Yes, but then there are other people around.
Or, to be fair, one big question. So, this is interesting. So Raskolnikov hid the stuff. Then went into just 3 to 4 days. So maybe it's not even there anymore. Maybe the friend already has it.
But then he wouldn't stick around, right?
Maybe he thinks he has more. I don't know. But I don't know. So what I find interesting, actually, this is really interesting. So I didn't think about any of this while I read it or while I wrote notes. But here's the interesting thing, right? As I said earlier, the friend, so this is one thing I actually wrote down. Razumikin constructs the murder perfectly. He says, oh, this must have happened. The murderer must have hid there, then they went down. He must have gone down into the empty flat, hid there behind the thing. Everyone went up, then he ran down. He got up like spot on. That happens after 3-4 days of raving. So maybe he does know more. I don't know. It's a bit difficult for me to... So the first thing is, of course, this is Russia in the 19th century. So maybe going out buying clothes for a friend is just a normal thing that chaps do. Maybe if someone's ill, you have to stick around. I don't know, like exactly what the rules are here, but it is all a bit weird. But maybe he's just a nice guy. He seems to, he has this party that he throws. He might just be a very sociable guy.
I wonder also if everything, like the plot, should be taken literally in a sense, because it could also be, and I think this is something I alluded to at the beginning, this kind of like feeling of people just being so intrusive and not leaving your space. And, if you think about his room, maybe it also is a bit of his mind, and there are constantly people around, and he just wants them to leave. He just wants to be alone. And he says that, right?
He says, I just want to be left alone, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe this is just like this friend that does well or means well, but then it's just constantly there and just doesn't leave him. It could also be potentially seen a bit as a metaphor.
Metaphor.
I was like, something sounds wrong here. Metaphor for something that's just so intrusive, although it kind of like, it's not necessarily in itself a bad thing, but it's just, you can't get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but they just won't leave him alone even if he says so. I mean, but then again, like what the friend's supposed to do, right? He clearly sees that Raskolnikov is not well at all. Yeah. Do you have more on that point, or?
No.
Okay. So this is just a really irrelevant thing that I just kept wondering about in this part, which is, why are there so many Germans in this book? It's somehow, he has the German hat, there's in the police, the German lady, there's another German couple that owns the house in there. Him and Raskolnikov are supposed to translate German books. It's just like, why is there so much German?
But I think this is historically, during that time, the Austrian and German, the Austrian Empire was still quite big. A lot of German-speaking people.
Yeah, but they say Germans, right? Not Austrians.
Yeah.
And I assume
but like
that. I don't know whether that was no, they would have. I don't know what they would.
But I think just so again, my interpretation was that historically, that would have been generally the case, that the German culture had maybe a bigger standing.
Yeah, I mean, this was after like Goethe, Beethoven, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, this was also before Russia really had a huge culture of its own. So all the Russian composers you can think of basically started with Dostoevsky. And the novelists, so it kind of all started with Dostoevsky. They had the big famous Pushkin is the big Russian poet, I think. But it kind of all started, like Tolstoy and all these people were later. So maybe it's just a cultural thing that Russia was, I don't know the history, but I think it hadn't existed in its state for that long. So, I don't know, maybe it was like a new country but anyway, one reason also I wanted to talk about this is that one thing that I found weird. So, last time I said that the translation works very well and it kind of captures the spirit and everything. So one thing that I found tricky is the accent of the German woman in the first chapter. I don't know whether you remember that.
The accent.
Look says no.
No, I don't remember her accent.
So there's this woman who's just being obnoxious in the police station, or not obnoxious, but she's in the police station and I can't remember what she wants. But he writes in kind of German accent, right? So it reads like, "There was no noise and no fighting in my house, Herr Kapitän." Mm-hmm. And that's what she says in English. That's on page 121. Und sehr, so like instead of there, it's Z-E-R, right? Mm-hmm. There was no scandal, blah, blah. So like the accent thing works, but one thing I find really weird, and I don't know what exactly he's trying to do here, is the sentence structure is bizarre, but in a non-German way. So for example, there's a sentence here where she says, I can't remember exactly what it's about. I think, Anyway, the sentence is, "Then he pottle take and begin pushing everyone behind mit pottle." And "then he pottle take" is not anything a German would ever say, right?
Actually, it stood out to me as well. But I just thought, sometimes when you try to speak in a foreign language and you try to get the sentence structure right.
Geez, so that's what I was, so this is one thing I was really wondering about, because, I don't know whether the Russian even has this in there. I'm assuming it would be kind of, I'm assuming the Russian has already this kind of fake German accent or German accent in there. Mm. But the weird thing here is that, so we're reading a book in English, right, where we have a German accent, but the sentence structure is not anything a German would ever say. You would not say, "Then he pottle take." You would say, "Then he takes the pottle." Like that's how you'd say it in German, right? Mm-hmm. Dann hat den irgendwas genommen. It's not dann I don't even know what pottle is supposed to mean.
But do you think that's such a big thing? Because we make mistakes when we speak in a foreign language, so it could just be like,
Yeah, but you'd make mistakes that. So here's the
not
thing,
necessarily. I can try to speak French and I know the French sentence structure is different to the German one. So now something is different, but I can still get it wrong.
Yeah, but you'd get it wrong in a German way.
No, I could be because like, not necessarily. I can change. Okay, so in German I would say it like this. I know it's different. I'm going to change it around, and it could still be wrong. But I don't think this is a big.
No, it's not a big point. It's just something I was confused by. So here's a question: do you think Raskolnikov wants to be caught by the police?
Oh, I think this is a question. I think it's a bit ambivalent. I think he can't deal with the guilt and the situation of like having to lie and having to like, he's completely out of his mind. So he can't deal with the situation. And in many ways, it would be a relief for him to be found out, put into prison, judged, punished, etc. So I think a part of him just wants to get out of this horrible, horrible situation and be relieved of whatever, the guilt in a sense that will be punished. But then there's this other part in him which is obviously also scared and of being found out and the consequences that would follow, and still wants to get away with it. So I think he's in split minds about it, or maybe not even minds. Maybe it's not even something that he can consciously or explicitly voice, but definitely on an emotional level, he seems to be torn.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. So what really struck me throughout the entire part 2 is just how bad he is at not being suspicious. Like, no one thinks anything of it, right? It's just this. Okay, so I can understand when he goes to the police that he hasn't been in a proper state of mind for probably weeks, right? But definitely not for days when he murders the woman. And he goes to the police and then they start talking about it. I can understand that he maybe loses his mind there and starts fainting. Mm-hmm. I think that's understandable. And that basically gives him a perfect excuse for just staying in bed for a week and being ill, right? Like, he's in bed and people think he's ill he could just lie there and not do anything. But as soon as anyone mentions this murder, he just loses his mind every time. Like, as soon as they say the murder, he just jumps up out of bed or something. Like, he has such a great way to just lie there and not say anything. But he just can't.
Yeah, he is not rational at all. And he is definitely not in control of his emotions. And the inner, I don't know, like turbulent of like emotions and thoughts, and he's like, I wonder also to what extent this is kind of like, if you'd know about like literature at this time, or like art at this time, to what extent this is like a character of the time, because he's so not in control and so torn and emotional and very angry and then very confused, and he's obviously like a very extreme character in some sense. I don't know really where I'm going with this, but it's definitely not like a depiction of a, you know, like a rational, collected person who's planned a murder and now carries it through and takes the right steps and precautions.
No, definitely. But I mean, so there's, of course, that basically nothing that he does is thought through or planned or executed well. But he does, like, short of actually saying, I murdered the person, he pretty much does almost everything. Like, almost everything he does is really suspicious once you know that he committed the thing, right? Like, once you have that thought, maybe he did it, then you realize almost everything he did. Like, when he went to the policeman, I was like, oh, you want to know where I'm reading these newspapers? And the policeman's like, what? No, like, you're reading newspapers. Like, I don't care. And he's like, he's really, I feel like I mean, you know, that conflict within him that you said earlier, he really wants to just be freed of this guilt.
Yeah.
But he also kind of doesn't. But then I wonder at some point whether he doesn't quite have the guts to actually almost go through with confessing his crime. But then he basically does as much as he can in the hope almost that people will just figure out what's going on. I mean, yeah, I also wonder, yeah, that's one thing. Another thing is, so, you know, he basically one of the first, I mean, of course, he was like ill for 3-4 days, but one of the first things he does after murdering the woman is visit the scene of the murder again, right? He pretty much, not immediately, but very early, goes back to where he murdered these 2 women. And so this might just be nonsensical TV stereotypes, but isn't that what serial killers do in all these TV things, that they like want to see the murder scene and all that kind of stuff? And when I had that thought, it kind of really fit with what I said earlier, that in part 1, I mean, like, he really didn't need to murder someone to get money. He's doing a lot of things that makes me think that almost that like the money is almost more, not an excuse to murder someone, but I don't know. Yeah, not entirely sure, but it is really weird to me how he, when faced with financial difficulty, decides to murder someone, and then as soon as he can, he basically visits the murder scene again. It's like, where's the blood? There was blood here.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it's like, I don't think that he knows at all. Doesn't even know why he's done what he's done, really. And also, I think one sentence that alludes to this fact that he might not even be himself aware why he's done it is on page 134. He says, suddenly he stopped. A new, quite unexpected and extraordinarily simple question had knocked him off course and filled him with bitter astonishment. If this whole thing really was done consciously and not stupidly, if you really did have a definite fixed aim, then how is it you still haven't taken one look inside the purse and don't even know what you've got? The very reason you accepted all this agony and consciously set out something so despicable, so vile, so low. So he himself, because this is kind of like an inner monologue, he's like, if this whole thing really was done consciously, so he doesn't know whether he planned it, and he kind of like talks to himself, well, if you really had this in mind, why, and you wanted the money, why don't you even look inside now that you've got a pass? And
why didn't he steal any of the valuable stuff?
Yeah.
Another thing that Razumikin says is like, why? I mean, the police also said this, like, whoever did this is a complete amateur because he stole like the purse and like some really cheap stuff, but like all the expensive stuff that was basically in the next room or in the next cupboard, he just left there. So yeah, it's like the whole financial thing doesn't really make any sense because he hasn't made any money from this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, I don't know, it's maybe it's this also like, I mean, it's a bit like, sort of, the book was published in 1866, but that's like just before Freud, really. But I'm just like thinking this,
like 50 years before.
Yeah. Yes, this is a bit too early, but it's very much seems
35. 40 years, not 50. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a bit too early, but it seems a bit like he's very much talking about this, like, that we're not all conscious of our acts, and we don't, like, we think we are the author of our own little story, and we do what we plan to do. This is what we kind of like tell ourselves. So this is what it feels like, but it's obviously not true. If you know a little bit about psychology, we know very little about the reasons for our actions, etc. But I think this almost seems like an extreme example of this. He doesn't know, and then he makes like some justifications, but then he also really wants to escape the situation, and on some level really I don't know whether he regrets, but he obviously feels guilty for what he's done and wants to be judged or be punished accordingly. But on the other hand, he also is very worried and scared and doesn't want to be found out. But what I think, and I keep coming back to this, to the other people who seem somewhat surreal as sometimes, and almost to me as intrusive thoughts. Maybe they can also be, on some level, be seen as people, or his own inner judgments of himself, because I do get the sensation that, as we've already talked about it, that they might know more about him or his actions than we think. And there's one section, it's on page 142, where the maid, she says that no one came, that's your blood yelling inside you. Mm-hmm. So it's before she says that's blood, she finally answers softly as though speaking to herself, and then he's like, blood, what blood? And you, the first thing you think is like, oh my god, she knows.
Yep.
But then she's like, oh no, it's the blood yelling inside you, as in like you're feverish. But I don't know, like it still seems like, what did she really mean? Does she know about the blood on his hands, or?
Oh, you think she might also know? Yeah.
I'm just yeah.
Yeah, it's a question whether that's a kind of cheap device to create a bit of suspense, just to kind of like, just to mess with the people, going like, oh, she knows, or whether it's her. Like, this is the thing, right? She might. So okay, there's this, like, that you said, like, this kind of, does she know, this question that sentence raises, does she know that he killed someone? And there's like two ways in which this could be true, right? Either it's the character who's playing with him, who knows, and is playing with him, or it's kind of the author who's just messing with the reader. And I'm not sure which one it is. I would imagine more the latter, but
I don't know. Or it could also be a third thing. It could be himself.
No, it's a dichotomy.
It's a dichotomy. Or it could be he himself who judges himself, that he reads judgment in everything other people say. You know, like sometimes when you're really like critical about an aspect about yourself, and then somebody mentions something and you hear only we're so like sometimes we're very hyper aware of things we don't like about ourselves or things we're trying to hide or whatever. So that we
like murdering someone.
Like murdering someone. So it could also be this third thing that they like he perceives what they say in a certain way. I mean, obviously he is explicit, but this could also be a bit of like a creative freedom to make this give this impression or whatever.
Yeah, the interesting thing is it's kind of difficult to disentangle or to decide or find out which of those interpretations it is, because of course we read the entire book through. Well, we don't really read it through Raskolnikov's mind, because we are still like outside and can observe just how insane he is most of the time. But we are still kind of seeing everything through his lens, right? So it can, like when the audience feels like, oh, does she know? You know, you have the same thing, right? You immediately go like, oh no, does she know? But that's because we're viewing the scene through his lens.
Yeah.
Through knowing what happened. So it's kind of difficult to tell which one it is.
Although sometimes I feel so I agree with you that it's obviously mostly through his lens, he's the protagonist. But I feel sometimes there are like passages in which it reads almost like a play.
You mean like when they talk, or?
No, but then it's like, for example, I mean, this is maybe not the best example of what meant, but after this blood incident, the last paragraph of this chapter is, she went downstairs and returned a few minutes later with some water in a white earthenware jug. And it's sometimes he's not like...
he wouldn't have noticed that.
Yeah, but sometimes it feels like sometimes he leaves and the person he interacts with stays behind and we know about them. And
I mean, to be fair, that's what he will know too, right? She goes down and then he comes back.
Yeah, maybe there was a bad example.
But I still find it interesting here how it's still kind of interesting how you have the scene just before when he's like, it's the first time he really asks, like, does this person, not the first time, but one of the first times that he really asks, does this person know that I murdered someone? And then you have this, like, as you said, I mean, the way you said it is almost like a description in a play, right? When you have like the acts, it's like very neutral. She went downstairs and returned a few minutes later, which is like the way it's written is almost too calm considering the emotional state he's in.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think like, yeah, sometimes it's a bit like this.
It's funny you mentioned earlier Kafka, right? And don't you think that basically part 2 here is almost this, or basically the process by Kafka is the same as the beginning of part 2 here, just that he didn't actually do anything. Or maybe he did, I don't know. But it's very similar, right?
Yeah.
Where he just gets here the police sends him a letter when he's in bed and he's just summoned there. But
yeah, for me it's also this situation of like, it's very different. I mean, the content is different, but the situation of Raskolnikov wanting to be alone and the people just not leaving him, this frustration reminded me very much about the frustration in the process where he wants to get somewhere, but he doesn't get anywhere. And
or in the castle.
Yeah. So I think it's some level there's some similarities.
Kafka might have read Dostoevsky. Who knows?
Might have done, yeah.
He pretty much definitely did, right? I mean, that was like one of the big novelists. I don't know. I don't know whether Dostoevsky always had this status, but I'm assuming. I mean, if you lived in Prague, you probably knew about Dostoevsky, right? But yeah, but some of also the general tone feels a bit similar. Yeah. One thing I also found interesting is just how, you know, how in part 1 I kept saying like man, Raskolnikov really doesn't, like, he really didn't think this through. Like, it's just so poorly planned. I find it funny how, like, it takes like 2 days basically for the police to find out, like, yeah, whoever did this had no idea what he was doing. Yeah. Like, they all said the same thing. Like, man, there's so many people around here. The murderer, like, someone visited the person, like, he got, like, you know, didn't take the money. It's just funny to me how, like, all these people also immediately went, like,
yeah,
what did this guy think? Like, it's just done so poorly.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, there's one general point about Raskolnikov's inability to actually do anything properly that makes me wonder whether this story has anything to do with morality. So initially I assumed, I'd heard before, okay, this guy murders someone and it's kind of justified, but not, something like that. That's kind of the only thing I really heard about this before. And I thought, okay, that's what it's like, about this moral question. Like, can murder be justified or whatever, you know, something like that. But the thing is, the more I read about this, he's just so incapable of doing anything. Like, if you have, I mean, it immediately made me think in opposition of the play Terror by Ferdinand von Schirach, where that is basically a dramatization of the trolley problem, where a plane is captured by terrorists and they want to fly into the football stadium in Munich, and a pilot shoots down the plane, which at the time in Germany was illegal. You weren't, in that sense, allowed to kill people to not them kill more people. But in that case, basically the entire, what von Schirach establishes in Terror is just, this guy was completely capable. Like, he knew what he was doing. This guy's completely sane. He's skilled. He's trained. He's educated. This is like one of the best pilots we can have. And he made a decision that's very difficult because this is a tricky moral question, right? But here we have a guy who's just so out of his mind all the time and incapable of doing anything that, to me, it almost, like, it makes it impossible to talk about the moral question, because he's just, God knows why he did this, right? As you said earlier, like, he, I don't know whether this was just a misconception of the book that I had, a vague misconception that I had a book before, that this was kind of a question of morality. But the more I'm reading this, the more I'm thinking, like, you can't question anything moral about this just because the person involved is so clueless and unplanned and unprepared, and that it is, I mean, a psychological novel, which is what Dostoevsky is also usually described as, right? A novelist who studies the human psyche.
Yeah. I know. I think this is probably a question we can't really answer at this point. Like, or you probably need to judge the book as a whole. Yeah. But I think comparing the two parts, definitely that question changed a bit for me. Because we talked about last week. We talked about how this, whether it would be justified, etc. Right now, it feels like nothing good is gonna come out of this. So therefore, wouldn't be justified. But then it's also like the next question arises is, do we judge the morality of an action based on its outcome, right? He could have, like, planned to relieve lots of people of their debt, but then it didn't turn out as planned. But does that make his action then worse? Which is how
there's actually, I think, a lot of question. I don't know much about this, but I think I read something once that it is kind of weird that, you know, in the law treats basically luck as an important factor in terms of how we treat people, right? Because if you drink alcohol, like, let's say you drink a bottle of vodka and drive a car, and nothing happens, but the police catches you, you get one sort of punishment. But if someone happens to be crossing the road or something and you hit them, right? Which in both cases you just drank a bottle of vodka and you were completely drunk when you were driving. The coincidence of whether someone happens to be crossing the road or not will determine basically whether you get a manslaughter or maybe even murder, I don't know, or whether you get drunk driving, right? So there is this kind of weird thing where
But that's not a very good example, no, because if you haven't drunk a bottle of vodka and you drive from A to B, you don't get any form of punishment, not at all. But if somebody happens to cross the road at a bad time and you run over them, then you might. There are consequences, right? So
let's make the example more extreme then. The police catches someone who was drunk driving and who drove over the pavement. Right? Let's say there was a bus stop or something. The person was completely drunk, drove over the pavement, and then swayed back onto the road, and nothing happened because no one was there.
But it's the same, like you can't, like the reason why this isn't a good comparison is because the action is different, and it's the same if you take away the alcohol. You would, if you drive over the pavement like this, you probably get some sort of punishment or fine or whatever. If somebody stands on the pavement, it has more severe consequences. So therefore
But then again, okay, if you take the drunk driving out of it, yeah, you accidentally, for whatever reason, drive over the pavement and don't hit anyone, you might get some sort of fine for that, for not driving properly. But if someone's there and you kill them... Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is just that in the law, you have this thing where coincidences determine how severe the punishment is, even though the person might have done the same thing. And it seemed to me that you were kind of alluding or talking about that when you said, like, the outcome of the bad act. Oh, no, it is a different thing, yeah.
I think what I was alluding to is, let's say so he plans to murder this woman, and he could have, when he first started planning the murder, the reason for doing this could have been like, okay, I'm not going to only help my own financial situation, but by killing her, a lot of people are going to be freed of their debts. And this could have been the main goal, right? To relieve people of their debts. And he goes there and murders her, and either it works and everybody is relieved of their debts, or something which he wasn't in control of. Let's say she had kind of like passed on all the debts that they had been already sold the debts to another person. So maybe another person is in hold of the, whatever the notes are called.
The monastery is, right?
Yeah. So maybe now it's just passed on and people are not freed of their debts, but they just owe it to somebody else. So, I think the question I raised was, does it make the action of murdering more immoral if there's no good outcome? So it's a bit like, like he could have maybe murdered Hitler at a certain time and you would have saved a lot of people's lives. But what if after murdering Hitler you realized that it wasn't actually him, but I don't know, like you wouldn't have saved anybody.
When you murder the wrong person almost. Charlie Chaplin, just because he looked similar.
For example.
Don't murder Charlie Chaplin, please, people. I mean, he's dead. But...
Yeah. No, but I guess this is like maybe extreme examples, but does it, if I'm, or let's say with the trolley dilemma, I'm intending to save people by pushing somebody else on the tracks, but then maybe it doesn't work, and
right, yeah.
The person I pushed on the tracks gets killed as well as the other 5.
Killed 6 people, yeah.
Yeah, like yeah. I mean, it is a bit of a different example, but what was my initial point? Yeah, I guess just the question whether his action, because last time we talked about, is it is it morally justified to murder somebody if it's for the greater good? Maybe that was his plan or his goal to start out with, but then things didn't go according to plan, and now it's in a big mess. Is this question still hold or not?
You mean like could, how should we say? I mean, the whole question of whether the murder could be justified if he helps other people, and whether this is changed now by the fact that something went wrong, all that kind of stuff, kind of presupposes that it's okay to murder someone to save other people, right? Because if you don't agree with that, then it doesn't matter what the outcome is, right? Like whether it worked or didn't work or whatever, then it doesn't matter. So in a way, I think the question you're raising kind of assumes now that it might be okay in certain circumstances, if I understand you correctly.
I don't know. I don't think that I have an answer to this question.
Yeah. But what I mean is just like that. I guess I'm just agreeing that like we're just moving completely away from that question because it's not really what the book's about. Right now, the book is about, in part 2, about, well, the punishment, I guess in this case, is psychological. His own guilt, his own... I mean, it's difficult to tell whether it's guilt or he's just afraid of getting caught. I don't know. It's a difficult thing with Raskolnikov. You don't know what he's thinking because he's probably not thinking a lot. It's really weird. Like, I feel like I've had a lot of interesting thoughts this recording, and yet I feel like I'm not making any sense almost in anything I said. Like, I feel like I'm very incoherent, but it was somehow still interesting. But yeah.
Well, I think a lot happened in this part, actually. It wasn't as linear as the first part, I feel.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Actually, I have two. Actually, it's just one question. Then I think we could maybe do this at the end of each segment. Mm-hmm. Or I don't know. Do you have other points?
No, it's fine.
No. Okay. Then my question. This is maybe something we could do at the end of each segment, which is, what do you think is going to happen in the next part? What's going to happen in part 3?
I really don't know. I think after this part is like it's hard to tell.
Part 3 is also like 100 pages, right? All the parts are roughly the same length, just to clarify.
I don't think he's going to be found out. But there is going to be something about his sister family situation, because I still don't quite understand why he's so angry at the fiance. Maybe angry is not the right word. Why he's disgusted
upset,
by him or upset or whatever it is. And I feel like I haven't been provided the whole picture in a way, in a sense. So I think
because so far he seemed fairly normal, right? He was trying to make an impression.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't seem to be anything really wrong with him.
Yeah, and also he didn't expect being greeted in that way. So exactly. there seems to be...
He seemed to try to make an impression despite everything going differently than he expected.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. So I think the sister, I mean, it ends in the sister and mother being in the place. So I'm assuming like part 1 is just going to take off where it left. So I'm assuming the next chapter is going to be about mom and sister and Raskolnikov and Lucien. Or at least, maybe not Lucien, but at least the first 3.
Yeah.
So, okay, I agree. I don't think he's going to be found out, but I think the police is going to at least explicitly suspect him. Maybe call him in or something. Like I think it's going to get started at least. Like, in part 2, we had this like very strong hints that the policeman is thinking some thoughts about Raskolnikov. I mean, they always say like maybe he's going crazy, but I think talking about the murder, because they must know by now also that he's one of the pawners. So yeah, I think they're definitely I think that's going to develop and increase, but I don't think, he's not going to get arrested or anything yet. So one thing is, this is actually something I noticed even, it was in the beginning of reading part 2, which is You remember we were talking about the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
The physical book, the cover. If you turn it around, on the backside, there's also a drawing. I always assumed that was a sister. When you actually look at the fine print, it says the first picture is called Raskolnikov's Dream, the front, and the back is called Zoneshka, which is one of the nicknames for Zonia, or whatever her actual name is, the prostitute daughter of the guy who just died and who he just spent time with, right? So the fact that she's on the back cover of the book suggests to me she's going to play a large role in this book, and she hasn't so far. So I think I think this part she might make a proper entrance. So far she's just been a side character.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's my detective work.
Yeah. Cheating a bit.
Hey, it's on the back cover of the book. Okay, what do we think about the friend? The friend and the doctor? Are they going to be in it?
Did you say the friend and the doctor?
Yeah, the two people. Like, are they?
I think they're going to be in it. Yeah, I think. I mean, especially the friend is so involved already, so I can't really see him leaving easily. But
I think the doctor won't, because I think he's getting better now, right? Physically.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing also, this is like when you read the list of the characters in the beginning. There's quite a few. There's like a few where you thought like, well, after I read part one, it's like, why are these people in there? So they must make some sort of appearance. Like one was the German landlady, whatever, is somewhere in here. Wait, what was it? Amalia Ivanovna Lippewechsel, the Marmeladovs and Lebeziatnikovs landlady. I think she might make a bit of a appearance at some point.
Yeah. We'll see.
Okay. Yeah, so that was part 2. Next week we're discussing part 3.
Sounds good.
Hopefully as insightful and even more coherent.
Yeah.